This is my last season, and right now, all I am focused on literally is making sure that my successor will inherit a fantastic orchestra. And I cannot wait to see what that next step will be. And for the next couple of years, I'll be conductor laureate, which I guess means I'll be watching the shop while they do the search. It's like a beauty contest, you know. You have all these people come in, and you, like with me, you find that person that clicks, you know, and that makes the player stand up and the audience. It's a mysterious thing. And that person will take over the orchestra. It will be their orchestra. I will be happy to see it from afar. And once, a couple of years later, when they have made it their own orchestra and turned it into their own ideas, I'll come back.
Giancarlo Guerrero has been music director of the Nashville Symphony Orchestra since 2008. When he leaves at the end of the current season, his will be the second longest tenure in the symphony's history. During that time, the orchestra has risen in prominence and reputation, taking home 14 Grammy Awards along the way, out of 27 nominations. Maestro Guerrero helped guide the symphony through two very different disasters. The 2010 flood ravaged the Schermerhorn Symphony Center. Then the COVID-19 pandemic shut it down for an entire concert season. Giancarlo credits his early experience in a youth orchestra with setting him on a musical path that has taken him around the world many times over. I'm Demetria Kaladimos, and it's Banner & Company. You were born in a dangerous place at a dangerous time. When were you really aware that that was happening as a child?
When I was about 8 years old, and but even before that, growing up in Nicaragua, I remember very vividly my parents talking about all the time that, you know, the revolution was coming, and nothing ever happened. You know, we lived under a dictatorship, and of course, as it happens, there was always the possibility that you know, it would be overthrown. And never happened. And eventually, I think people just stopped paying attention. And I remember very vividly being at a party at an uncle's house, a birthday party in September of 1978. And one of the guests, a friend of my father, his son was actually a fighter for the Sandinistas. And the father said, "You better go home because it's blowing up tonight." And by that point, apparently, everybody had been drinking a little bit. You know, we always keep hearing it's not going to happen. And guess what? That night, it was the first, I guess, attack that they did on the government. And at that point, I think it became very real. My sister was 6 years old, and she remembers it, you know, and all of us kind of scrambling and hearing helicopters and everything. And the image I have is all of the parents started grabbing mattresses and putting them against the windows and everything, and it was very loud and pretty scary. And then from then on, the war really started, the Civil War, and for the next year and a half, 2 years, we were basically under our beds, you know, waiting for it to be over. And yeah, so it kind of happened very suddenly, even though we've heard that it was coming. By the end, I guess it was like, you know, crying wolf. Nobody believed it, and it finally did happen.
And how long did it take your parents to make a plan to get out?
It was after the war. So what happened is we were there, the war was over, the dictatorship fell, the Sandinistas won, and of course, as it happened, everybody was so happy. But as it always happens, the new conditions or the new people coming in are not any better than the previous one. And everybody found that out very easily. This is the height of the Cold War. You know, remember those days in the 1970s, you know, the United States against the Soviet Union and Cuba. And after the war was over, we went back to school. I used to go to a Catholic all-male school, and went back to school, and all of a sudden, we had no priests anymore. Now we had Cuban teachers. And my father, who used to work for a private company, all private companies left the country because they were privatized. And I mean, they were taken public by the government. So my dad was left without a job. So 1 + 1, my parents said, "So what's in it for us here?" So they decided that it was going to be best to leave. And so we went next door to Costa Rica. And but even leaving there and arriving there as refugees, basically, when we arrived there, my parents always said, "But this is temporary. I
Uh-huh.
mean, things are going to get better.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll go back." So my father got a kind of temporary job. He's like, "No, no, but we're here just waiting to see for things to get better back home." And in the meantime, us kids, I have an older brother, a younger sister. I mean, we're settling roots. We're going to school. And eventually things never got better. And so we stayed there. It was very difficult, especially for my father, because even though he was next door, they're very different countries, Costa Rica and Nicaragua. So my father never really. So my parents actually divorced, and my father went back to Nicaragua. For us, we visited, and I visited many times to visit my grandmother and people that were alive at the time. But now, really, I mean, there's nobody really left. My father has since passed away. So I really don't feel any strong connections as much. I have very little family left there now. But yeah, I mean, it's funny how some of these things happen. I mean, had the war not happened, there's no way I would be a musician.
Yeah, Costa Rica gave you music, right?
Correct. Nicaragua didn't have anything like a music program for children, where Costa Rica, a country that had to begin with no army and spends a lot of money on culture and education, they do have a youth orchestra. And my parents signed me up just because they thought I could carry a tune, and more importantly, because they wanted to keep me out of trouble. After school, keep busy, hopefully. And that's how it became.
You were cool with choosing music over something like sports?
Yeah, because I think the music thing, I guess it just happened that they took me to the youth symphony and said, "Here, do this," and they did the aptitude test where they have somebody went like played a note, bam, 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 and you went bam, 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 you're in, and you have a good ear for it. And very quickly, I made a lot of friends there, who to this day, by the way, my friends from the youth orchestra are to this day my best friends in the world.
Really? Are they still in the field?
Oh, all of them, and very successful. Oh, I'm so proud of Costa Rica in the sense that this very small country with the youth orchestra, which was founded in 1972, 53 years ago, has produced some of the greatest musicians I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. Now, from Costa Rica, our little country of 2.5 million, we have musicians at the Met Opera, the Minnesota Orchestra, in Deutsche Oper Berlin, in the Israel Philharmonic. I count myself. I mean, this little country has been producing this incredible level of players. So yes, many of them are who I grew up with, all of them, they all are now successful musicians themselves all over the world. And after, I guess, being a new kid in a new country can be very overwhelming. And in many ways, music kind of saved me, gave me a purpose, gave me friends, gave me something to be very passionate about. I mean, imagine being, 12, 13 years old, and you're so passionate about Beethoven and Brahms. And so, I mean, that hasn't changed a lot. And now that I get the privilege of conducting the Chicago Symphony, my friends come.
That's
and they're
wonderful.
looking and saying, this is surreal. I mean, we used to be listening to these orchestras back in the day, and now here, one of ours is up there conducting them. So
I'm typecasting here, but aren't most conductors pianists, violinists, concertmaster violinists?
It's one of the dirty secrets of conductors. There's quite a few of us percussionists out there. I am not the only one. Fritz Reiner, Claudio Abbado, Simon Rattle, until recently music director of the Berlin Philharmonic. And I think it may have to do something with the fact that we're good with rhythm, which as a
Very
conductor
steady.
is imperative. And I guess we're used to having a stick in our hand. So I don't know if that, but it is actually kind of a funny thing that also, because we're in the back, we get to see a lot of how conductors work. So we learned from far away what works and what doesn't work. And also being a part of an ensemble, an orchestra or a band, you learn what not to do being up there. I remember so many times especially if you are a pianist and you've never played an orchestra, you don't know the psychology within an orchestra. It's tricky. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, what city, musicians in orchestras operate like a country of their own. And you have to know how to manage, how to inspire them, how to be diplomatic, how to be very political. And that goes a long way, along with, of course, making great music. So I guess all of these things prepared me to eventually drop a stick and move to the front.
Okay, percussion has a wide gamut. You've got the mallets, you're hitting chimes, you're tuning timpani. What was your favorite?
I love whenever I played snare drum and bass drum, but it also depended on what the pieces that we were playing. So if we were playing something very modern, I loved the mallet stuff because it was very challenging. But if we were playing like a Tchaikovsky symphony, I wanted like the cymbals, because those big crashes were so dramatic. I mean, that I mean, when you came in, everybody noticed. Rossini's William Tell Overture, the triangle part. Oh my God, that triangle part in the ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, you're creating this wonderful effect, beautiful moment. If you're playing Daphnis and Chloe, the wind machine, of course. If you're playing Sleigh Ride, I want the whip. So it really depended on the piece. And many times, honestly, we would have to literally flip the coin to see who wanted, because we all wanted to play everything. I will tell you, there's one instrument, though, that all percussionists dream of someday playing, and that is the hammer in Mahler 6. It's an actual big hammer that you hit. It's 3 notes or 2, depending on the version, that you just whack this thing as loud as you can. And it's like the hammer of Thor. And I only had the privilege of playing the piece twice, and I missed both times because, again, my number did not come up. And I have a dream someday that I will retire from conducting, go back to percussion just for the opportunity, maybe the possibility of playing that hammer before I die.
How about bolero? Have you played the snare forever?
I never did. Also,
really?
I lost the opportunity. Yeah. I mean, everybody wanted to play bolero. Interesting enough, I just conducted a few weeks ago, and every time I see the snare drum, I say, oh, lucky bastard. But bolero, the difference with bolero is that it is so difficult that, I mean, it puts so much pressure. I mean, you're really in charge of the whole, not even the conductor.
Right.
I mean, it is the snare drum. The conductor, you stand up there and you look pretty. If the snare drum is not there, there's nothing you can do. And it's one of the most incredible hypnotic pieces ever written. You just repeat this thing for 14 minutes nonstop, and somehow it became one of the most popular pieces of music ever written. Who knew?
Well, the movie helped, too.
The movie with Bo Derek helped a lot, yes. I guess making the piece very sexual does help. But it is, I think Ravel accidentally discovered something about the human psyche that we like repetitiveness. We like this idea of hearing the same thing over and over. And it's like very hypnotic. We cannot look away. And Ravel wrote this as a joke. I mean, if he were to come back and found out that this is his most popular piece, I think he would die again, because he did not take this piece seriously. It's like, who would in their right mind even think that this is successful? Well, guess what? You might have discovered oil by accident.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kaladimos. We'll be right back.
Birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, whatever the occasion, it just got a little more personal with meaningful photo gifts from Shutterfly. Add a silly photo to a gold-rimmed mug for your bestie. Put your sweet puppy on a cozy fleece blanket for your teen. Gift your husband a desktop plaque featuring all the kids. Enjoy 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
At the final rehearsal before opening night, Maestro Guerrero worked with the musicians of the symphony one last time to get things just right. Our producer Steve Harouche got to sit in as they worked through some last-minute tune-ups on Wagner's Flying Dutchman overture. Here he is, talking with the first chair violinist about one section near the beginning.
Yeah. Do you want to try? Don't worry. It's just the violin. Just the violin. And boom. Does that work? Yeah. So, yeah, I just came from a real life.
The Flying Dutchman was inspired by real-life events. Giancarlo explained that Wagner was on board a ship that got caught in a terrible storm at sea. The composer thought he was going to die and was inspired to write this piece as a result. So they're going over the opening one more time to really get that heightened emotion into the performance. does one, I mean, I know you study conducting. Full disclosure here, my undergrad was in music, so I've had my conducting class. I thought I was good. Everyone thinks they're good until they're standing up there, right? How do you get the necessary experience to really excel?
Well, it's like the chicken and the egg. So you remember this from your time in school, that all music majors have to take conducting, because at some point you will have to conduct something. If you're a teacher, you will have to conduct something. And basic conducting is just right here: floor, window, window, ceiling. That's it. I mean, you just do the basics and then get up and lead an orchestra. The problem is that your instrument, if you want to call it that, is this dragon with 100 heads. How do you practice? I mean, if you want to play the piano, you sit at the piano and you practice. You play the violin. How do you practice conducting without real people? Because let's face it, we all went through this as young conductors. We conducted the armchair conductor, conducting the Beethoven symphonies with the CD. The problem is that it doesn't matter what you're doing, the CD is always going to sound great. Try doing that with real players. If you don't do something very clear, it's not going to be together. So that is the idea of how do you practice without an orchestra, but who will ever give you an orchestra if you have no experience? So at the very beginning, literally, you have to start from nothing. And many times even convincing your friends. That's what I did. When I applied for a master's in conducting at Northwestern, I actually bribed a lot of my classmates because I needed to do a video to send. And so I needed 13 players. So I actually ended up doing like laundry for a couple of them and running errands for a couple of others. I couldn't pay them. So they would let me conduct them and make a video, and I could send for applications. And that's how you start. And anybody that will let you get in front of them, you take the opportunities, building podium hours. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. But trust me, I mean, early on, you're going to step on a lot of landmines. And I have all my videos from my early career.
You kept them. Really?
It's the scariest thing on the face of this earth. I mean, the uncontrollable shaking. Because, I mean, especially when you're dealing with your classmate that you go out and party with them and all of a sudden you're Mr. Maestro. I mean, they're not going to take you seriously. And here you are trying to, and little by little, that shaking goes away. It's still there, by the way. It's still there. It never goes away. But now you can't see it.
I hate to ask about anyone's crash and burns, but did you ever have a moment where you got lost in the score?
Oh, God, yes. Especially early on when you're learning a piece for the first time and you don't know where the minefields are. And you get to that one section where something happened and it goes away. Fortunately, I have to say that those things have happened in situations that I think most people would not find out. The players know, though, and that's really the key. There was one moment, though, in my career, and it happened here in Nashville on my birthday about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And that was the scariest moment, where there was a big boo-boo that I made. And it was something that happened. I skipped a few measures in a very, very, very difficult piece by Bela Bartok, The Miraculous Mandarin. It was in the last 40 seconds of the piece. Something happened. I skipped some measures, and I started conducting in the wrong spot. And literally, I realized that something was going on, and I'm trying to save the day. The musicians are looking at me like, where are we? And all of a sudden, I started seeing players like this, dropping, like, we don't know where we are, giving up.
Oh, no.
And that moment of panic when you realize, oh, my God, we're going to stop. And I can see the end, the finish line. I mean, if I were to stop here, where would I even start? And all of a sudden, I just started waving my arms as loud, like a crazy person. And somehow we finished together. Somehow. I still have PTSD from that. That was the closest thing I've ever experienced, and it was the most panicky. And to this day, I carry this with me in a way that it was a wonderful learning lesson for me of something that happened that, for me as a young conductor, I guess at the time, if you want to call me a young conductor at the time, I made when you have something in front of you, you have a decision to make. You have one way or the other way. I took the completely wrong way on how to approach something, and that happened. And nowadays, I think that is always with me. Whenever I have that situation, nowadays I know how to deal with it. But that's how you learn.
Have you had to revisit that Bartok?
I have, yes. And now of course, I mean, now I do the piece, but every time I get there, I remember, and I remember exactly what I did. It stays with you. But yeah, I mean, it's live performance. Anything can happen. I mean, that's the joy of it. If I really knew what was going to happen, I mean, that would be a boring, career. So every performance, anything can happen, and you have to be ready for it.
People who have not sat in an orchestra or in a band and played under a conductor sometimes don't understand, why do you even need this guy?
Yeah.
Why do we need a conductor?
When you have even 20 people or 50 or 150 or 300 if you include a chorus, there has to be somebody that keeps things together. There has to be something, I guess, like a traffic cop that gets us to get started. And music has an ability to stretch and to move. Music is a breathing organism. You breathe with it. Not everything is metronomical. It can't be. That's not how we function. And in the moment, especially in a performance or even in a rehearsal, you want to have the ability to be spontaneous. And great conductors have that ability to, just with a flick of the hand or just with a little move of the shoulder, musicians understand that. And you're able to shape phrases and shape melodies.
It's like mind reading, isn't it?
Oh, no, it is. Conducting is the only proof we have that telepathy exists. It is. I mean, it really is. And especially when you include a soloist as well. As a conductor, you have to know, even before the soloist knows, where he or she's going and be able to catch them and to react to them. So basically, that is what you do. I mean, as a conductor, you're kind of putting things together. The other part of it that is important, especially when you work with great orchestras like the Nashville Symphony or Berlin or Chicago or any orchestra that you work with, you have 100 virtuoso players in an ensemble, each of them very opinionated. We're artists, we're temperamental. And you come to do, let's say, a Beethoven symphony, the Pastoral or the Seventh, which we're doing this week with the Nashville Symphony. They know the piece. They've played it with many different conductors. They've recorded it, they've taken it on tour. Here's the difference, though. Every single one of them remembers it differently. Every single one of them has a different idea of what the Beethoven 7 is. I love it when I go, let's say, to the Boston Symphony. I've done the Beethoven 9 at the end of Tanglewood. That's like a tradition. They do Beethoven 9 at the end of Tanglewood, one rehearsal. And I remember seeing it the year before I conducted it with another conductor. And it was kind of weird to watch because, again, the performance was not very cohesive. Because, again, some players remembered it one way and some other players remembered it another way. And with one rehearsal, it's hard to make, a case for it just very quickly. So as a conductor, you have to many times come and kind of establish, what it is your way to do it, and then get the musicians to kind of buy into it. And in the end, for me, the real job of the conductor is inspiring. It's not leading. I mean, for me, I remember this from my own days. Those conductors that have the ability, from the way that they approach the music, the way that they conduct, it's so magical, it's so mysterious that they put you on the edge of your seat. That energy. And you just want to play 10,000%. And we don't know what creates that. And you cannot learn that. You either have it or you don't. A lot of it is charisma. A lot of it is chemistry, too. I've been with orchestras that we don't communicate, even though they're great and I'm a very competent conductor, but it's like we're speaking different languages. And then you go to another place, in another country, in another language, and you go like this, and all of a sudden magic happens.
I've heard you say that in some places, the first downbeat, you're like, this is working.
Oh, of course, yeah. Even that quickly. And I will even tell you, I've even had moments when I walked on stage for the first time in a new hall, in a new orchestra, and I know. You feel it. Yeah. After doing this for a long time now, for a few decades, you walk in and there's a sense that this is going to work. The way that the players even look at you like, and they're going to give you the time of day. At the same time, most musicians, when there's a new conductor, you have 2 minutes to make your case. And if you're able in those 2 minutes to make something of a case with something, even something very standard, that they look up and they sit, they sit up and they go, wow, this is, then you have them. And the key is to continue, not so much convincing them. It's not that. Try to get 2 musicians to agree on anything. I'll try 100. It's conviction. When you have that, and you're driving towards it, musicians respect that. They appreciate the fact that you are bringing something to the table, and that you are working very hard to make it your vision.
It's Banner and Company. My guest is Maestro Giancarlo Guerrero. We'll be right back. You inherited this orchestra, at sort of a difficult time. Mm-hmm. The previous maestro had just passed away.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So when I came to conduct the orchestra as a guest conductor, which would have been probably a one-off, and I would have never come back to Nashville, Kenneth Schermerhorn passed away a few days before my arrival here. I mean, he had been ill, but it was still very sudden. And the orchestra, the community, everybody was in shock in many ways. So my concert, which would have been a normal, subscription program, became a memorial service for him. I am sorry to say that I never met the man, even though I see his legacy everywhere. But I feel in many ways that I would have loved to have met him and spent time with him. You know, we don't get to see other conductors because we're always on the road. And but yeah, I mean, my arrival here was in many ways kind of accidental because of the passing of Kenneth, and of course the new hall being built at the time. And so all of these things came together. I mean, many things that sometimes you have no control over. And here I am, and it's been an amazing run. I could not be happier about my time here in Nashville and our family and our children growing up here. I mean, we love it. I mean, Nashville will always be a part of our lives.
Was there added pressure because this is Music City and it is a town of people with very good ears and lots of skill?
I found that out as the more time I spent in Nashville, the moniker of Music City, it is really well earned. I mean, this is an incredibly, as you correctly say, people with good ears, but it's an incredibly sophisticated audience because in this community, you get bombarded by so many different styles of music, genres, at a very high level. That's the other thing. I mean, the level of music making here is one that it's hard to find other cities that have that in such a small place. You know, you go to the studios here and the level of arrangers and performance studio players, it's so world class that I guess audiences have gotten used to world class performances even when they go to any of the honky-tonks on Broadway. So little by little, I came to realize that first and foremost, the orchestra had to live up to those expectations moving into the new hall. But more importantly, the orchestra was already at a very high level because many of those players that played Beethoven and Brahms in the morning were doing studio work. So these players were versatile themselves. That's one of the things that I think attracts so many of the players when we audition musicians, when we have a position open. They come to Nashville and they will tell you one of the reasons we love Nashville is because we know that we're going to have a life outside of the concert hall. We're going to have a very successful and very enriching life, playing great music outside and not just playing classical music. And nowadays, I guess, with the world becoming smaller, you want to do a little bit of everything. And I do know that has really made the orchestra so much better because of the fact that they are so comfortable in any type of musical language that you put in front of them. And you put any piece of music in front of them, they can read it and do it very quickly because that's what they have to do. And I love it because they finish their rehearsals in the morning with the symphony, and then they just go to any of the places in Music Row or anywhere else, and they do other projects. And that is very unique. And for me, as a music director, working with musicians with such, not only curiosity, but such versatility, it's really like driving a Ferrari.
Yeah. The Grammys don't hurt either. Did we have a Grammy prior to you?
Before I arrived, the artistic advisor when Kenneth died was Leonard Slatkin, and they made a recording of music of Joan Tower, and they won their first Grammy right before I arrived. In a category, it was the best record of the year and best orchestral performance, which was a big deal, and everybody was like, what, Nashville? It was a very well-kept secret. And I came here, and then since then, we've won quite a few. I mean, I have 6 myself, and I think over 20 nominations. And so, yeah, the secret is out. I love when I go to, Australia or Europe or something, and I go to a record shop or something, I love to see our recordings there. I mean, we're ambassadors for Nashville and for Tennessee. And these are all live performances, which makes it even more meaningful that this is stuff that actually happened during a performance with our audience there. I always tell this to our audiences that you're part of that. You were there, your spirit, you helped us create this. So I think it's a wonderful snapshot of what's happening here musically.
What was the riskiest or edgiest thing?
We did a piece, I guess you can call it the world premiere of Charles Ives' Fourth Symphony, which is called the Universe Symphony, a piece that he never finished. He never finished the piece because Charles Ives, this great American composer, late 19th century, early 20th century.
Famously wacky, they would teach you in school that he was
I think
odd.
wacky doesn't even begin to
Yeah.
cover it. We haven't caught up with him, let's put it that way. He's a composer that the ideas that he had in his mind, we're going to need another couple of thousand of years. To give you an example, the Universe Symphony, this was his idea. He wrote all of these sketches for the piece. And he said that his idea was to have the piece played by different orchestras in different planets. And why not have different orchestras in different universes? But when I was writing this in 1910, we don't have the technology for it. So here are the sketches. So someday, somebody in the future can finish this, and with the technology, we'll be able to do this. That's far out. And the idea was to have literally 5, 6 different orchestras playing simultaneously, I guess, communicating by, I don't know, Wi-Fi. I don't know how. And so we did this piece. I felt that I wanted to do it. It was a great challenge with, 5 orchestras, 5 conductors. And the only way that you can do this, we're not going to be in different planets, but we do have computers and we have click tracks.
Yeah.
So we would wear click tracks to keep things together, even when the music is, So we had, and I had actually a computer that I would click and start and off. And we took all the seats out in the main floor, like we normally do for our pops. And we actually had people come in and on rugs and we sit down. Like it was kind of a little like
Groovy.
a hippie concert.
Yeah.
And I went out and I gave a little explanation about the piece. The piece called for 25 percussionists. It was this massive, and again, there was 5,
That's why you love it.
probably so. And there were 5 of us conductors. And at one point I was conducting the whole thing, and at one time one of the orchestras went on their own, and one of the orchestras, while trying to keep it together. This was, I would say, an incredible challenge logistically, musically, and we took it to Carnegie Hall to make, wanted to make a statement. I mean, bring a Beethoven symphony, they hear that all the time. They've never heard this. And they went crazy. Not only here, the audience, I got to tell you, I still hear people telling me that was, to be there was historical. And this, I guess, following Charles Ives' vision, this, I guess, is a step. So this was the first performance of attempting to put this thing together, because all of the sketches are at Yale, where he used to teach. So we had a musicologist put it together, make a first version of it. I can't wait in the next 50 years who the next person is going to grab with whatever new technology. Because let's face it, the technology from 10 years ago, it's even better now. So I wonder what we even could do this. I will tell you, there was one moment when I was conducting in the dress rehearsal that I clicked the track and the computer went completely blank. And what happened? The whole orchestra went. And we had to stop. Technology got in the way. And I'm like, so here comes our computer IT guy from the symphony. He got a big standing ovation, and he's there, fixing the thing, because if this happens at the performance, we can't play.
You're sunk.
I mean, we need the technology. We cannot do this. That's why Charles Ives said, this is for the future. In the technology that I have available to me, we cannot play the piece the way that I want it. So maybe someday, here we are. But still, there was a virus. And wow. I'll never forget it. I clicked the thing, and literally the computer went completely blank. And all the players literally started going like, you can't do this. So it was unforgettable.
Are you a composer? Have you written anything?
Oh, God, no. No, I've only composed one piece for my composition class that we all have to take as music majors. And I can claim this. I'm very proud of this. It was the most horrible piece of music ever written on the face of this universe. I am very proud of that.
It will never see.
Oh, my God. It was so horrible. Even the teachers were laughing. Oh, my God. This was so bad that night we had a party at a friend's house. And I guess I maybe had a little too much to drink, and I grabbed all the parts. I had them in my bag, and I grabbed them. And in a very flared, I threw them in the fireplace. And I made a vow. And I said that never, ever would anybody ever be subjected to listening to a piece of mine. But at the same time, I also made a pledge that I would dedicate my life to championing the works of living composers. And I have kept that part. But no, composing, I don't know how they do it. my only one attempt was such a disaster that no, I have no desire for it. No.
Banner and Company is a production of the new Nashville Banner. Our producers are Steve Harouche and Andrea Tudhope. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. We do one little thing on our podcast.
Yeah.
We have a secret final question in that fishbowl.
Okay.
So pick one out. It's from a previous guest. I can't tell you who,
Okay.
but read it out loud and
I love this.
give it a try.
From Hal Cato, if you could
change one thing about this city, what would it be right now?
Oh, this one is actually easy. All of these low-moving vehicles downtown, I don't know, maybe it's my luck. I always get stuck behind them every time I drive.
You're talking like Hell on Wheels and
Anything that just moves, anything that is like a pedal tavern or a party bus, or I always get stuck behind them. And of course, I'm always coming to the concert, and it is so loud. We got to figure out a way to create an area for them to just go around. And those of us who are trying to get to our jobs, I would appreciate. But by this point, I guess, I mean the genie's out of the bottle. I do have to say, I don't mind it so much when I'm actually walking, but when I'm actually going to a concert, and I will tell you, even from our patrons that have to drive and find parking space, traffic, as we all know, has become a little crazy, and I don't think those things help a lot. And in many cases, they almost seem like they have priority over the streets, and it can be a little frustrating from time to time. But, at the same time, I do have to say, where else in the world can you listen to Alban Berg and Gustav Mahler and Stravinsky in one of the greatest concert halls in the face of this earth, Schermerhorn, and walk less than a block and listen to the best bluegrass in the world? Only in Nashville. And that, to me, is what really is the essence of this community. Nowhere else can you be able to find that level of complete opposites. And I think that is what makes Nashville so unique and special.